Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Today's webinar is Taking Control of Your Law Firm's Online Marketing. Hosting this webinar is John Corcoran, and speaking will be Dan Jaffe. To give you a quick introduction to myself, my name is Victoria Blute, and I am the LawLytics Community Manager. My job is to keep my ear to the ground about web trends and tech issues so that you can make sure that you're staying on top of your law firm's marketing online. Joining us today as our host is John Corcoran, who really needs no introduction here. He is a very impressive fellow. He was an attorney in San Francisco, a former Clinton White House writer, a former speechwriter for the governor of California. He is the creator of Smart Business Revolution, and his work has also been published in Forbes, Huffington Post, Business Insider, among others. John, we are really excited to have you here today. Thanks so much for hosting.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
We can.
All right, good. Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. And yeah, I'm really excited to have this presentation here. And I guess I'll introduce Dan now. So Dan and I connected a number of months ago, and one of the things that I'm really impressed with about Dan is that he's just really a real giving guy and really enjoys educating others and helping other attorneys to focus on what they do best. And what's incredible about him is he had a really great career in the 90s and 2000s, built a private practice, did over 100 jury trials over a 10-year period, and got frustrated with legal marketing as it was, and got burned with an SEO company, which I've attempted that in the past. I've spent money on SEO companies as well, and so he took it one step further, which I didn't do. Is he basically taught himself different SEO strategies and marketing strategies, and eventually went down a route of starting his own online legal directory that did quite well. He ended up selling that to a large internet company in about 2010, and then in 2011 founded LawLytics, which helps lawyers to focus on what they do best, which is practicing law, so that they don't have to worry about all the other technology changes that is really truly changing so dramatically quickly. So you need to really stay abreast of all the changes. So Dan, looking forward to this presentation here today and some of the things you have to share. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Before we dive into the substance, I want to start with a little bit more of my story and how I got to where I am today, which is in a position where I'm really trying to empower fellow attorneys to take control of their marketing in a real way that allows them not only to thrive with their marketing, but to have that peace of mind knowing that the results that they're getting today are going to build on themselves and are going to be repeatable throughout their career. I started my career as a lawyer in Seattle in the late 90s, and it was right at the beginning of the tech boom. And like most young lawyers who were just starting a private practice, business was hard to come by. And I hustled it the normal ways, got contract work, did fill-in work for other attorneys, tried a number of marketing modalities, including Yellow Pages, including the little classified ads in the back of the Seattle Weekly magazine. And what I heard was a lot of promises. Promises of X amount of ROI for dollars spent. I think that the Yellow Pages were telling me something like a 16-to-1 return was their historical benchmark for attorneys. And what I experienced was a lot of letdown. And in retrospect, that letdown is probably not too surprising. But even then, before the internet was really prevalent in attorney marketing, what I was experiencing at that time is what I saw almost all of my colleagues who weren't just independently attracting enough referrals to do the kind of business that they wanted to without doing any marketing. We all felt out of control. And it was that way with the Yellow Pages. It was that way with all the pre-internet advertising, and it's very much that way online. And it doesn't have to be. And what I discovered is if you're out of control of your firm's marketing, unless you're that rare attorney that has all the business you'll ever need by referrals, you're really out of control of your practice and you're out of control of your future. And if you're in that position, you're not alone. In fact, most attorneys feel that way. And it's not surprising that those that don't, that figure out how to take control, oftentimes become market leaders. So, who benefits from you being out of control? Well, your firm's competition certainly does, especially if they are in control. And we'll go into more depth as to what control means in just a few minutes. Those on whom you're dependent, meaning your vendors, whether it's an SEO person, a webmaster, a directory that you're paying money to, Google, Bing, pay-per-click advertisements, any number of sources of disposable advertising. If you're out of control and you have to keep giving them money that gets used up and disposed of in order to keep the flames of your practice burning, then you're out of control, and those on whom you're dependent are benefiting. And then there's a little more subtle aspect online, which didn't really exist offline, and that's companies that harness your assets. And by that, I mean companies that are currently using attorneys' names to attract business for both those attorneys and for their competitors, and are profiting handsomely from it. This webinar will give you a high-level overview of what's going on and some ideas about how to take control over it. So what does it mean to be in control? When you're in control, you know what's being done on your marketing and more specifically on your web presence. You know why it's being done. Your assets are accessible to you. And by accessible, I mean you have the ability to not only know where they're at and what they're doing, but the ability to exert influence over them. So, for example, we see so many attorneys that have multiple listings, even in Google's directory and in the local search and so forth. And they come to us and they say, "Well, I've got all these going every which way, and I can't figure out how to consolidate them. One points to an old office, one points to an old website." And they just don't know. They're out of control because there's messages about them out there that they can't easily change and update. And then finally, if you're in control, you can measure results independently. And we'll get into that a little more detail in just a moment. Let's look at what being in control does not mean. It certainly doesn't mean that you have to do it all yourself. In fact, you don't have to do really any of it yourself to feel in control. But even if you completely delegate all of your marketing, if you know how everything works and you know how to exert influence over it and when and why you should, you'll sleep better at night, and you'll be impervious to the dozens of not only marketing messages but cold calls that I'm sure your firm gets every day to try to sell you marketing services, especially online. And being in control does not mean that it has to take a lot of time. Even if you are doing a lot of it yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to take up an amount of time that makes it prohibitive or that really cuts into your practice. So how much do you need to know to be really in control? Do you need to be an expert in the following topics on marketing, on technology, and on search engine optimization? The short answer is no. And these are all aspects of this larger piece of the puzzle that seem confusing at first and seem daunting. And that's why there are so many online legal marketers that can get away with selling attorneys services that don't do them any good, that they don't need, and frankly, that are sometimes counterproductive. By taking just a little bit of effort and exploring how this stuff actually works, any lawyer, regardless of background, can get control. So in this webinar, we advertise that we're going to talk about 5 things that you can do to get in control, or 5 things that you can control. And these are the things that we're going to cover. Your name, your message, your ad spend, your website and blog, and your data. And we're going to go through 5 slides, one for each of these, and then we've got a couple conclusion slides. We will leave plenty of time for questions at the end, and so if you do have questions that come up during this, just put them in the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll make sure that we get to them. So the first thing that you can easily control, and that unfortunately many lawyers don't, is your name. A lot of lawyers who really aren't paying attention to what's going on in the marketing world are surprised when they Google their name with the word attorney or lawyer after it. If you haven't paid much attention to your web presence, and I don't know how many people in this group that we're presenting to fall into that category, you may all be very tech savvy and watching it all the time. But if you haven't been, or you're just coming into this, coming out of a firm that you worked for, or coming out of government and going into private practice, it may surprise you that there are several directories that have taken your name already and are using it, and that if you don't have things on the web about you that you own and control, they're likely to rank for your name. And on the surface, that could seem like a good thing, and it can be turned into something that is at the worst neutral and potentially very positive. But if you have directory listings that have been put out there with your name that you don't have control over, and there's no information about you, when somebody searches for you directly because they've been referred to you and they're just looking for either your contact information or they're looking to learn a little bit more about you, which you should really assume at this point that nobody comes into your office to talk with you without Googling you first. And so when they do Google you, if they find an empty listing, let's say on Avvo, for example, that just has your date of admission to practice and where you're at, and you haven't touched that listing, they're going to see you there, but they're also going to be exposed to all of your competitors. And so one of the things that you can and ought to do, and this is very low-hanging fruit, and people sell this service, but it's certainly not worth paying for if you've got 10 minutes to do it yourself, is you can go through and find those listings, claim them for yourself. So claim your listing on Avvo, claim your LexBlog, or Justia rather, has some directory listings that are free that can make a big difference. Claim those, make sure that you have information about you that you would want them to see. Next is claiming social media accounts, or creating them from scratch if you don't have them already. Populating them with information that's not only personal to you, but that paints a picture that you want people to see of you as an attorney. The more slots that you can take up in the search results when people search for you, the more in control you are going to ultimately be when it comes to your web presence. And it also can help mitigate any kind of damaging information that others might put on the web about you in areas that you don't control, because you will have monopolized, so to speak, more of the listings that are going to come up in the top 10 or top 20 results in the search engines. If you don't own your own website and blog, it's very important that you do. Potential clients look at a law firm's website, and for that matter, blog, and they're usually built in, as their virtual office, and will judge you on it before they ever step foot into your physical office or talk to you on the phone or meet you in court. And so you not only want it to be something that reflects the messages and personality that you want them to experience of your firm, it's something that you want to make sure that you actually have title to. And so it's really important to make sure that you not only own the rights to the intellectual property on your website, but you own your domain name as well. And I'm often asked, because there's so many marketing messages coming at attorneys all the time, well, should I buy this directory listing? Should I do this? And my answer is typically, well, let's look at your website and your web presence that you own first. Because if you don't have anything there first, you haven't really built your home base yet. And if you haven't built that home base, all you're basically doing is buying disposable advertising when you're spending money elsewhere. And so if you own your own website and blog, you can control how your name is used on that, obviously. And then the fourth part of this is to participate in online discussions. When you participate in discourse, whether it's on social media, whether it's on other attorneys' blogs, by creating comments and so forth, you create additional impressions that have your name attached to them. And so it can help not only put you in control of what people are going to see about you because you wrote it, but also can create those additional impressions that paint you as a subject matter expert surrounding your message and your area of practice. So let's talk about your message. It's something that you can very easily get control over. And unfortunately, a lot of attorneys don't. A lot of attorneys basically outsource their marketing because they think it's too hard. And along with it, or it takes too much time. Along with it, their message. And if you're, as an attorney, having somebody, even if they're a very experienced marketer, talk about what you do in your practice and try to get your potential clients and referral sources to not only find you and like you, but ultimately hire you, you may end up with a message that is very different from the kind of practice that you want to have, that doesn't fit with your personality, and that ultimately can create not only marketing problems, but client expectation management problems once they become a client. What we found, and this has been consistent over my entire practice using the internet, and it's even more relevant today than it was 10 or 15 years ago, is that if you provide useful answers on your website as opposed to marketing messages, you can really get off this fear cycle that most attorneys that are marketing online exist in, fear of what Google is going to do. Responding to the next marketing message that they get from some website design or SEO company that's telling them Google is going to do this. Google just did this. Now today Google did this other thing. We got to react, and that means you have to spend more money. Well, you don't have to pay attention to any of those things if you've, from the beginning, built a sound infrastructure that provides useful answers to questions that people have. Because what is Google and what are the other search engines really, other than a place where people ask their questions? And people go and they type in questions just like they ask you when they're sitting across your desk from you when you're doing an initial consultation with them during the intake process. The way that I used to write my web presence that worked marvelously well, and the way that we counsel our LawLytics customers to create their web presence or their messages when they're creating their own content with us, is to say, imagine that you have all of your clients that you've ever had lined up to sit across your desk from you in your office. What questions have they asked you? What do they want to know? What are their big concerns? And if you take care of those concerns and you answer those questions really well online in a way that's organized well, you've got control of the message. You've connected with them on a core level because you've given them something of value before they've ever given you anything. You've created almost a reciprocal relationship with them without even trying, and it can happen in the middle of the night while you're asleep. By the time they contact you, they feel like not only have you already helped them, but they feel like they know you. They feel like they've already had a conversation with you. And by controlling this messaging rather than outsourcing it to somebody that doesn't understand how your practice actually works, you not only make it more likely that they're going to contact you and hire you, you also make it more likely that once they do so, you're going to spend less time servicing them and answering their questions. Now, of course, this presupposes that your practice is a type of practice where the information that you would be giving away on the internet is not the only thing that you have to sell. But most practices that are viable these days are like that, rather, other than the few purely advisory practices that are still out there. If you're doing criminal defense, if you're doing personal injury, if you're doing divorce, bankruptcy, employment law, really any of the consumer-facing type issues, even estate planning, answering questions really makes sense. And once you've gotten them through your cycle of becoming a client and they're happy, it makes sense to ask them for recommendations early and often. Now, those are recommendations that you can put on your website, certainly. And with LawLytics, we built in a module that makes it really easy for attorneys to request recommendations from their former clients and put them right on their websites with a few clicks. But it goes beyond that. It's important to ask for recommendations on sources that clients go to, such as Avvo, such as Yelp, such as Google, and others. Um, it's a lot to ask for a client to go and put those on multiple places, and it might make sense to ask them to to do one or two and ask other clients to do others. But if you get out ahead of that with positive messages from clients that you are sure are happy with your services, you'll better be able to weather any attack on your name, your reputation, and your message, either by an unscrupulous competitor that hires somebody to write negative reviews about you to knock you down, or by a real client that there might have been a misunderstanding with. And then this really all goes into becoming an online thought leader. When you participate in the conversation, when you interact, especially with other attorneys, and if your area of practice crosses over into other professional verticals such as accounting, medicine, or anything else, by interacting with those related verticals, it makes it very easy for them to think of you, because even though there's a lot of attorneys shouting as loud as they can on the web, most of them aren't saying anything these days. And if you can control what your firm is saying, or better yet, say it yourself, by becoming that online thought leader where you're sharing your opinions, you're sharing your insights on your area of practice, even though the internet is very crowded and people might outrank you or bid more for you, that more for keywords than you might be willing to bid in the search engines, you're going to be thought of more often because you've made that impression as being a thought leader, which leads into talking about what you're spending. Now, there are really two ways to succeed and get clients online. Way one is to earn it through thought leadership, which is what we've been talking about. And way two is to buy it. Now, there's been a lot of push by SEO and marketing companies to sell you, the attorney, ads recently, and the price has gone way up. And I'm talking about ads that go on Google. I'm talking about remarketing ads. I'm talking about really any kind of pay-per-click or impression-based advertisement that goes online. And the problem with it, from my perspective, and I'm talking as a practicing attorney now, not as the CEO of LawLytics, is that not only is this a constant bidding war with my competitors, and it's really a bid for what typically ends up being a zero-sum game. There's only so many clients out there to get. The marketplace tends to bid the cost of client acquisition way up by using this system. And really the only people that are benefiting in the long run are the people who are selling the ads, and the people who are brokering them if you're having somebody manage your pay-per-click advertising for you, especially if they're taking a cut. And if they have multiple people that they're managing these for, well, it doesn't take an attorney to realize that that's a conflict of interest based on the way that competitive bidding works. And so in order to really be in control of your marketing, you have to find a way to avoid being dependent on disposable ads. Now, I'm not saying that I'm completely negative on disposable ads altogether. They can be a good bridge and they can be a good supplement. But if you're completely dependent on disposable ads, you may spend 20% of your gross revenue this year on ads, but you don't know what the marketplace is going to do next year. Next year, to get that same amount of business, you might need to spend double that or triple that. And there's a point where it's such a diminishing return, which is what happened with the yellow pages, that people just aren't going to want to do it anymore. But those that are still able to do it can have puppy mill type practices and continue to survive. It's just a kind of a game of attrition. The good thing about the internet and taking the thought leadership route is that money is really not a barrier to success. A solo practitioner directly out of law school, armed with some time, some enthusiasm, and some good writing skills and a good marketing internet platform, is able to not only compete effectively with firms that have multi-million-dollar advertising budgets, but in many cases beat them. And because this ends up being a game of attrition, it's very, especially if you have the time on your hands early on to invest that kind of effort in, you'll never have to spend as much money as people who never bothered to do that. And so, regardless of where you are in your practice life cycle, if you have the ability to start creating assets online that allow you to become a thought leader, then you won't be in this sort of never-ending arms race to see who can spend the most to get the same amount of clients. And those assets really allow you to transcend that area of basically competitive bidding, which is something that I know keeps a lot of attorneys up at night. It certainly kept me up at night. And I know attorneys that have at times spent so much on their disposable marketing that they've expressed to me that they're afraid to go to the restroom on a Monday because that's when the phone typically rings the most, and they're paying for those phone calls whether they get them or they miss them. Let's talk about your website and blog. We touched on it briefly before, but even if you don't want to do any of your own marketing, at a minimum, you need to be able to have access to easily edit and add to your website and blog. If you don't, and you're dependent on sending changes to a marketer, what happens if you notice something that has an ethics issue on your website, especially if somebody else is putting it there? You notice it at 2 a.m., it takes your web guy anywhere from a day to a week to get back to you to make the changes. They may not understand the ethics involved, and it's something that at least would cause me disturbed sleep if it was out there. And you'll feel so much better if you have the ability to control it. Second point is having a built-in blog. The blog is where you can really shine and show your personality. And if you're in control of your blogging messages, and it's something that's really easy to do once you get started, but really hard to get started with if you've never done it before, you'll find that blogging gives you a tremendous amount of control of your practice. The more that you update it, the more return that you're going to get from it. If you answer questions there, it's going to really set the tone for every client interaction that you have. And this is a little bit reiterative, but educate your potential clients and referral sources. Don't sell them. The difference between a marketing company and you talking about your practice is night and day, and people don't want to be sold to. They want to be educated. That's really what the internet is all about. And finally, your data. Whenever possible, make sure you have access to the raw data. That means not depending on marketing reports from an SEO company or a webmaster that shows you kind of cherry-picked data. And most importantly, learn how the data that you get from your marketing reports, and a lot of attorneys use Google Analytics. With LawLytics, we have a very simplified attorney-centric analytics control panel built right in, so attorneys can get on and see where they're at any point. But learn how that data translates into actual paying clients, actual opened case files, rather than the vanity metrics that some marketers use to try to make attorneys believe that something is happening when it's not. Those are words such as clicks, visitors, stuff like that. They don't necessarily mean much. And once you're in control and you actually understand what they mean, it'll save you a lot of wondering. It'll save you a lot of blind dependence on somebody else who may or may not have your best interest in mind. And it will allow you to incrementally make improvements to your overall web presence. 2 more slides left, and then we'll get to the questions and answers. I see several things as big threats to law firms, and it really oftentimes comes down to attorneys don't have the time to spend focusing on what they see as something very difficult in their marketing. And so it's sometimes a case of being your own worst enemy just because you don't know what's out there. And I think a lot of it stems from what we were told in law school, at least I was, that the practice of law is noble and that the business of law is something that will kind of take care of itself if you're a great lawyer. And that doesn't necessarily seem to hold true anymore, because a lot of people that are really crappy lawyers but seem to be very good at marketing are getting a lot of money and able to stay in practice, where a lot of good lawyers are wondering if they're going to make it. And I think a lot of it boils down to putting a stigma on the role of marketing and planning marketing. And I think if you can get over that if that describes you, because it did describe me very early on, based on what I had been told in law school. The sooner you get over that, and the sooner you kind of embrace marketing as a natural, essential, and really noble part of your practice, the better. And the good thing is that marketing, although it's still the word that we use for attracting new business from people that aren't otherwise referred to you or somehow know about you independently. The act of marketing now, when you're in control, is really just the act of communicating, and the internet just gives you a much bigger forum to do it. Biggest thing that I see attorneys doing is abdicating control, because they have either a mental block to taking control, or they fear it's going to take too much time, or it's just something that they're just not interested in. The attorneys that get over that really do well. Number 3, playing in somebody else's yard. What I mean by that is basically creating assets for somebody else. So if you're a member of an online legal directory that you don't own, that you don't control, whether you're paying money for it or not, if you're getting on, you're answering questions, you're contributing to their knowledge base, what you're doing is you're helping them build their asset into something of value. You don't own or control what you've put on there once you submit it. And even though you might benefit from it initially, if at some point you decide to stop paying them, or they change their business model and only make it feasible for clients to find you if you've paid, then if you don't play their game, they've got the content that you've created, and they're leveraging your labor in order to sell marketing to your competitors, who will then get the clients that you've worked hard to attract. And then finally, competitive spending in a zero-sum market. There's really only so high that the cost per client acquisition can go before something breaks. And we've seen it go up drastically, especially with pay-per-click marketing over the last several years. Same thing happened with the yellow pages as well. It becomes an arm race. And if you can extricate yourself from that, and I promise you, you can with a little effort and some smart choices, it puts you beyond that competitive spending arms race, and really sets you up for something that is sustainable, which brings me to our last slide. by building assets that you own and control and that appreciate over time, you'll have something that's working for you indefinitely. And by that I mean a good blog post. No, you spend an hour doing it, or you pay a couple $100 and have somebody else write it for you. Once that's out there, it's going to attract people that are interested in it day and night and can continually result in new customers or new clients. Whereas if if you spend $200 for a click and that one click happens to be somebody who's not a viable potential client, well, that $200 and that opportunity are gone. And then finally, when you do all this, you're creating an infrastructure that requires minimal or no upkeep. And by upkeep, I mean both financial upkeep, so you don't have to keep feeding the beast money month after month, and it requires very little of your time once you've created an article. So I see this common, and I would dare call it scam out there, that has attorneys believing that you write a good piece for your website, whether it's a substantive piece that goes on your main website, whether it's an opinion piece that goes on your blog. There's this industry set up to sell you ongoing search engine optimization for that. Well, once a page is optimized for its goal, it's optimized. And it's almost a logical fallacy to say that it needs to continually be optimized. There's literally nothing that's happened in the last 10 years that would require re-optimizing a well-written web page that was not originally written to fool the search engines. And so if you do all of these things, you create something of value, and I promise you, you'll feel more in control, and you'll have the tools to really build your practice into whatever you want to build it into, rather than really playing into the hands of marketers and being more or less a prisoner to what they're doing and how the technology and the search engines are evolving. With that, I am going to open it up for questions. I want to thank everybody for attending. I'm going to see if there are questions yet. Let's see. Give me just a moment while I read through these. So I'm going to read the question out loud, and Tori, if you see others or if you have insight on this as well, please feel free to jump in. So the question is, if you have a good website, what is your recommendation as to the third-party avos of the world that do have your stats and potential rating? Ignore them, engage them, or other. Well, let's talk about Avo specifically. I think Avo is so pervasive at this point that it makes sense to claim your profile. If you don't claim your profile, people are going to likely find you if they search several pages deep for you, even if you have a very good defensive web presence that you've built. And so by participating in them, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay them anything for that, but by claiming your listing, playing their game to get your ranking up, adding your information and so forth, and getting people to recommend you on that, it makes good sense because, especially if you're in a larger metro area, there's a good chance that unless you're in a very obscure area of practice, your competitors have done it. So I would say it's something that you need to embrace just because it's out there. But if you control it, then it can't control you. There's still going to be maybe some leakage. Now, what I would avoid is gratuitously linking back from your website to any of these directories, Avo included. And the reason is that when you have somebody on your website, so you've got this great website, you've got great content on it, you own and control it, and when your potential client or referral source is on your website, they're a captive audience. But the second they go off your website, whether it's to a link to your social media presence, whether it's to Avo, whether it's anywhere else, if they go to Avo, they're immediately exposed to all of your competitors, even if you pay their Avo's monthly fee, so that the advertisements for your competitors are removed from your direct profile. Searching for other lawyers is still a click away, and I think it's naive to think that people would go there only looking for you and not explore what else is going on. And if you send them to social media, other places, they can get lost not only in your competitors but videos of cute cats and stuff like that as well. And so my thought is that when you have them at your website, you want to try to keep them there. Let's see. Question is, what are your thoughts on answering questions on Avo and Justia? I'm against it, quite frankly. Unless you have such a robust web presence that on your own website and blog, you've already answered every single question that your potential clients and referral sources might have in so much excruciating depth that there's literally nothing to add. And we have customers with LawLytics that have web pages at their websites that they built into thousands of pages and get thousands of visitors to those pages a day. And they still haven't answered everything. And so that's a pretty high bar to cross. But before you turn your attention into building Avo or Justia's infrastructure, and it's nothing against either of those companies, and there's many others that do it, I would just recommend building your own house and your own foundation first. Question is, are there any, and these next two words are in quotes, amateur mistakes, end quote, that you see attorneys make with their websites? Yeah, we see a lot of amateur mistakes. And, a lot of them tend to swirl around design, but a lot of them are content related as well. And I literally, like, if with this question alone, I could talk for the next 2 hours about things that attorneys have done wrong and do wrong with quite a bit of regularity. I'm going to try to keep this to just a couple examples, and we can always get more into it offline if you want to contact us as well. But one of the things that we see is really getting distracted by the design takes people away from the mission of the web presence. So when you think about it, if you have an actual viable potential client that has gone to your website, typically they're not there for entertainment. They're not there to feel good. They're there because they have a problem or a question that needs solving. Depending on your area of practice, it might be something that's life or death. It might be something that that's they're not going to sleep until they get it answered. And the last thing that most potential clients want to see is a lot of motion going on. They don't want to necessarily see the attorney popping out of the screen. They don't want to see the attorney walk on and talk on a video. They don't necessarily want to see videos that play automatically. They don't want to see a slideshow that not only has a slide going across, but a bunch of moving parts that fly in. Yes, there are a lot of creative things that people can do with web presence, with websites. The technology is there to make things beautifully brilliant. You can have video backgrounds. We don't recommend those. They're distracting, even though they look kind of cool at first glance. It's really getting distracted by things, and these are usually things that you pay a web designer for, that get in the way of your goal, which is to ultimately have your potential clients find you, like you, and hire you. And there's a lot of webmasters that consider themselves artists, and a lot of website companies that sell specifically to attorneys that do get so focused on the design because it's one of the tangible things that attorneys can see. And it does help sell when attorneys don't know the difference, but don't get bogged down in design. The next mistake that we commonly see is negating content. And so if you don't have content and by content I mean written words that explain answers to questions that people have, there's no way anybody can find you. If you don't constantly add to that, the website becomes stale. If you don't have a good base to start out with, there's no realistic scenario where that website becomes an appreciating asset that will start giving you new business without you having to continually pay for it. And so it's a matter of thinking about it like that, like you're building something that ultimately is going to answer all of questions that are put forth typically to Google, but could be directly on your website as well by potential clients. Next question is, what do you think about websites built on WordPress? I like WordPress. WordPress is it's a ubiquitous platform. It is something that, not only are there a vast number of attorney websites built on it, but a vast majority of other new websites that are coming into existence are in fact built on WordPress. We looked at using WordPress for our LawLytics platform before we decided to build something from scratch, and we got a lot of feedback from attorneys. And the reason why we decided not to use WordPress to build our platform and instead to build it from scratch is that, one, there are so many moving parts to WordPress that it's hard to get it to do exactly what an attorney needs to do. So you can't really focus it very well without a lot of work. And a lot of attorneys that we interviewed that were using WordPress and then switched over to LawLytics just has such an easier time because LawLytics is something that's built for attorneys specifically, whereas to get WordPress, for example, to do everything that LawLytics does, from an attorney perspective, you'd have to find multiple plugins. You have to continually update those plugins. It takes a lot of work, and ultimately, it's likely, unless you're doing it all yourself and you want to learn WordPress, it's ultimately less of a hassle and a better use of your time to be concentrating on writing the content and communicating with clients and practicing law rather than fussing with the technology. But there are a lot of very good attorney websites built on WordPress, and there are a lot of vendors that sell WordPress sites because WordPress is a free platform. Okay, so next question is, you talked about SEO and pay-per-click advertising. What do you think about Facebook advertising, your experience? Well, Facebook, it depends on the type of case. We've had very few of our customers report to us that Facebook advertising has been a worthwhile ROI for their web presence or for their law firm, rather. Certainly, there are a few exceptions, but the way that Facebook typically works in a social capacity is, in my opinion, better left for just sharing information. So the way that we see our customers getting clients through Facebook is more like, okay, you're a divorce lawyer, you're practicing in, let's say, Los Angeles, and you're connected with somebody who has a friend who just changed their status to "it's complicated," and that created a conversation around that. And then they started asking about who knows a good divorce lawyer. I just got served with papers, or my friend just got served with papers, or whatever. And then the discussion ultimately leads back to you. They see that you're connected with that person that has made the referral. It's a point of social proof. Whereas the advertisements are more often ignored and less trusted. That doesn't mean that it can't work. It's just one of those extra things now to buy that I haven't seen that positive of a return on investment from. Same. I would say the same with most of the direct marketing. Now, there is an exception if you're doing remarketing. So for those of you who don't know what remarketing is, if somebody goes to your website first, then they're tracked once they've been to your website, so that you start your messages, your advertisements start appearing. So if they go to your website and they're thinking about hiring a divorce lawyer in Los Angeles, for example, they go to your website, they leave, because most people don't make contact on the first try. They'll usually look at several sources. They'll look at competitors. They'll look at you on directories. They'll look at your Google listing. They'll try to find your social media. They'll go back to your website. They'll contact you. But say they've been to your website and then they put it down. They're kind of just thinking about a divorce. They haven't decided that they're going to. There's nothing in motion yet. Then all of a sudden they start, and divorce is probably a really bad example of this, because there are some ethics implications of remarketing and divorce, at least in some states. So be careful with that. Use this example with a grain of salt. But let's say somebody has searched for that. They've gone to your website with remarketing. Then they start seeing your ads again. That can be effective on Facebook, because people spend a lot of time on Facebook. And, while they're there looking at what their friends are doing and watching, cute videos of cats and political satire and stuff like that, then out of the corner of their eye, the little plaque that says, looking for a divorce in Los Angeles catches their eye, and then they're back to your website. And certainly it costs you money to get them back, but they start interacting with your brand. They start interacting with you. It makes it more likely that they're going to, based on sheer number of impressions, ultimately engage with you. Let's see. Do you see any more questions? It looks like I've covered all of them, Tori, but there may have been more that you documented.
I do not see any other questions on my end, Dan.
Okay, so let's give it another 15 seconds or so if anybody's typing in anything right now. And if nothing comes up, I want to thank everybody for attending. We can be reached here. So I believe that there's nobody on this webinar who is a current customer of LawLytics. But if there are, that you can always contact us. We're here to help and coach you through whatever questions you have. If you are not a LawLytics member and you have questions about your marketing, we're always happy to talk with attorneys. We love it when attorneys get involved, even if they're not using our platform. We love it when they start to get involved in their own marketing and want to take control. We think it's about time, and we think that this is a situation that as attorneys start getting more and more control, the overall integrity of this online marketing industry, which is, in my opinion, very lacking in a lot of respects, will start to naturally improve, because there won't be so much room for the fraudsters and snake oil salespeople to hide. And so, if you want to even just talk something over with us, we're always happy to talk with you. You can email us at info@lawlytics.com. Call us at the number on your screen there, 800-713-0161, or visit that consultation link. And there's links everywhere on our website to get to the free consultation. And we're happy to talk with you about your web presence, answer your questions, and take it from there. It looks like we may have actually had a couple more questions come in here. Give me just a second. Another question is what is your experience with ads on mobile apps through Google Play and so forth? I don't have enough data to be able to answer that. I imagine that if the mobile app was something that was attorney related and you could get advertising on it. So for example, if there's an insurance company that is selling ad space and you're a personal injury attorney, that might make a lot of sense because they're right there and they see it while they're interacting with it. But just as far as like pure impressions, it's not targeted enough for me to be able to say that it's something that I would even recommend being on the top, say, 50 things to try next. Next question. Question is, can you remind us what LawLytics is? Yeah, absolutely. I haven't done any shameless plug at this point, so I guess I'll use this opportunity to do this. So LawLytics is an online marketing software, service, and support system that we designed from the ground up. We're about a 5-year-old company now, and we have our own marketing technology that not only builds websites with built-in blogs, they're all responsive, mobile friendly, and tend to do very, very well when used based on our formula. We focus on helping attorneys do exactly what I've talked about in this webinar, taking control of their web presence through really turning themselves and their websites into thought leaders. Our software is built to interact automatically with social media accounts. It has a way to not only have clients contact you through your websites based on specific forms that can be built and embedded in every page of your website and can be different on any page, so you can collect specific information depending on the types of referrals or clients that you're targeting. But it also allows you to track and understand what your clients are doing on your website, not only how they're getting there and what they visited, but when they came back a second time, what ultimately influenced them to reach out to you, whether it's through a phone call or whether it's through a form on your website, and ultimately helps you to be able to refine your messaging so that instead of spreading your effort and your marketing dollar around blindly in hopes of covering as many of the numbers on the table, so to speak, as you possibly can, it gives you that intelligence that over time allows you to refine it to the extent that you can really get your ROI for your marketing time and your marketing dollars invested to a point where it's almost unheard of as far as the returns that are possible to achieve with it. And it's really because you're in control. In addition to the software that we have, what happened is we started LawLytics as purely a software company, and the idea was to provide this great piece of software that's easy enough that any attorney can use it to thrive online. And we had a bunch of attorneys that came in and really started thriving online. I mean, we have an example of an attorney that went from nothing on the website to millions of dollars of revenue coming in from the website. And when that happens, you get to the point as an attorney where if you've spent your effort building that up, you understand where your business is coming from. But then if the calls continue to come in and your revenue continues to build, you get to a point where your time is better spent financially practicing law and you have to work off the cases. And so we got to the point where we realized that if our customers who were succeeding didn't have an ability to get what they needed, which was high quality, ethics compliant, well-written legal content to go into their websites just like they would write for themselves, that they might go elsewhere. And so several years ago, we created an additional part of LawLytics, which is a content creation service. And we employ mostly attorneys as writers. It's managed by attorneys, and we do it all in-house. It's all based out of our Tucson office, and a couple remote writers who have been with us for a while. One who was in our Tucson office and then moved to Portland, Oregon. But the idea is we provide content for attorneys when they need it. We love to encourage you to write your own content, and we can supplement content for you. We can write it all for you. We can write starter content to get you over that hump of getting a website up and running. We have attorneys that we're building out websites that are more than 1 million words to become market leaders. It really just depends on what your goals are. We have the infrastructure to get you there in a way that you're working with a company and group of individuals within that company that have been there, that have practiced, that really understand what it means. And so, and the idea is the service is very flexible because, we understand that some months you might want to write your own content. Some months you might be in trial or on vacation and want help. And so we've provided this very flexible infrastructure where you don't have to commit for long term and can kind of get the services on demand as you need them. Next question, and it looks like a bunch more came in, so I'm going to just keep going through these, and I'll just keep answering the questions until we've exhausted them. So if you have some and want to just stick around, we'll just keep going. Next question is, does the blog have to be part of the website? The answer is no, it doesn't. Another aspect of the LawLytics platform is that it's built to be able to easily handle literally as many blogs as your firm wants, or websites and blogs as your firm wants or needs to have. And what we realized is that some attorneys want to have a separate website and blog. Some attorneys want to have separate websites for various conflicting niche areas of practice and so forth. The website never has to be part of the blog. And the way that we built LawLytics is that if you want your site to be just a freestanding blog, you press a button, it turns it into a blog. If you want it to be a website, it will have a built-in blog as part of it that you can turn on or off, use or not use as you see fit. But drilling down to the larger philosophical question, about 10, 12 years ago, when blogs were relatively new, it was more difficult technologically to have a website be part, or a blog be part of the website. And for that technological evolutionary reason, a lot of attorneys' websites were separate from their blogs when they had blogs. And there's this argument going around that, well, the blog is informative and it's an opinion piece, whereas the website is advertising. I think that there's very few people that buy into that anymore. In terms of what we've seen for the ultimate return on investment, if you're going to have one website and one blog, we do typically recommend combining the two, because then you're focusing your readers of your blog on who you are and what you do. So for example, you could be blogging and have a great following of fellow attorneys as you're blogging about a constitutional issue or the Supreme Court vacancy or whatever, things that are not going to necessarily appeal to non-lawyers. Those lawyers that are following on your blog may respect your intellect, may interact with you, but may not really know what you do or even feel that you're open to accepting new cases. And so if you have your blog as part of your website, certainly the information that you put on your blog that attracts them is still there. And we've seen many cases where attorneys create great followings on their blog, and then it just happens to be that instead of going to a different website to find out what the attorney does, they find out on the same website and they see, oh, this guy's open for referrals for this kind of case. Oh, he's in this area. I just got some, my partner has a niece that just got arrested in that area or whatever. And it just makes the connection easier. And the thing about the internet, and this really gets to the heart of this question, is people don't want to spend any more time or any more attention or effort than they need to. And if you're making them do more work by going from a separate blog to a separate website to another blog, or you're taking them there with links without them really knowing, and it's kind of jarring because they go from one to another if they just click on blog on your website, you're sending them the wrong message in terms of the psychology of the average internet user, which includes all of your potential clients. Question is, will you be sending a recording of this webinar? Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and typically what we do is we make recordings available about a week or so after the broadcast. The other thing that because I think a lot of people here are new to LawLytics that you may not be aware of, is we do 2 webinars in the average week for our customers, and in the vast majority of those webinars, non-customers are also invited. And we have a pretty decent sized library now of on-demand webinars that we've done in the past, covering a wide variety of legal marketing topics. And so if you go to lawlytics.com, LAWLYTICS.com, under the Learn menu, you'll see a link to both on-demand and recorded webinars if you want to check some of those out as well. And I think this is the final question now. So when I get done with this answer, if there's no more that have come in, we'll go ahead and wrap this. The question is, when getting started, besides the initial time to set up a website, how much time on average do you think is necessary to develop a decent presence? Okay, so taking the time to set up the website aside, so when somebody comes onto LawLytics, if they don't have any web presence at all, to start out with. So we're starting from a brand new site as opposed to importing an existing site and putting it on our LawLytics system and working with it from there. We recommend starting with about 10 pages of content before launching. So you don't want to launch a completely empty site if you can avoid it. And it really just depends on your market and really how you define decent web presence as well. So if you want to dominate California, for example, in a competitive area of law, the answer is going to be very much different than if you want to get noticed for personal injury in Wyoming. That said, what we typically do when we're starting with a customer is we look at their web presence, if they're bringing one in. We look at their competitor's web presence, and we just kind of give them an idea of what's out there. And if you see your competitors are succeeding having 50 pages and the content is good, it might mean that you have to have 60 pages. It might mean that you have to have 100 before it's considered decent, meaning that it's producing a sustainable return on investment. It could be a lot less than that. For competitive markets, you might need literally 1 million words of content. But the thing that most people skip in their logic when they're thinking about getting from point A to point B, so from getting from nothing to viability and return on investment when they're building a web presence, is that time that they're spending to get from point A to point B, so get an organic web presence that's not dependent on disposable advertising to the state where it is viable. Although that time may be time where it's not performing as well as somebody that wants instant gratification would want, in the end, it's like the tortoise and the hare, where by creating these great assets, once they're there and once they get traction, then they never need to be fed again. And so, if you look at the time horizon for return on investment in a matter of weeks or months, you might get trapped in the never-ending cycle of disposable advertisement. And I would say, as a general rule of thumb, since I don't know anything about your particular web presence or what your market is like, I would be patient and give it at least 4 to 6 months before you expect to see any meaningful earned return. And by earned return, I mean something that you've written that you haven't paid any money to promote turns into a client. Certainly, you can use disposable advertising as a bridge while you're waiting for that to happen. But 4 to 6 months is a good rule of thumb. If you're in a brutally competitive market, it might be longer. If you're adding content at a very leisurely pace, if you're doing it aggressively, and if you're doing it well, it still could be as short as 4 to 6 months in a major market as well. So, with that, I know we covered a lot. If you have questions, let us know. We're always happy to help, and we're happy to talk it over. And I want to thank John again for putting on this webinar and inviting all of you. And look forward to seeing you at future LawLytics webinars. We will be sending out announcements, and we hope that you can join us.